The route guidance will start now. Next left, and then right turn at the end of the road. Right turn at the end of the road, and then right turn. Next left. Proceed about 7/10 of a mile to Forest Avenue. In a quarter of a mile, right turn onto Forest Avenue. Next right. Proceed about 3 miles to Oyster Bay Road. Miles ahead on the route. Slow traffic.
Silicon Valley bank crisis, a fragile financial system. Banks are rushing to the Fed for urgent loans at a record pace, eclipsing the 2008 financial crisis. Anita Judice, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Steve Donna Palmer. This is Bloomberg. Now a check of Bloomberg Sports.
Fairleigh Dickinson looks to become the first 16 seed to reach the Sweet 16 when it plays number 9 seed Florida Atlantic in a second-round matchup. The winner will advance to the East Region semifinals and play 4th-seeded Tennessee on Thursday at the Garden. Princeton's win over Missouri advances them to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 1967. Elsewhere, UConn faces St. Mary's. The Nets host the Denver Nuggets. Tonight, defending champion Team USA will face Cuba on the WBC Championship. That's a Bloomberg Sports Update. I'm Joel Scherr.
From ABC News, it's This Week. Here now, Jonathan Karl.
Joining us now is Senator Elizabeth Warren, a member of the Senate Banking Committee. Good morning, Senator Warren. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Great to have you. You heard Secretary Yellen say that she has confidence that the banking system is sound. Although this week we saw troubles with yet another bank, First Republic Bank, getting a $30 billion lifeline from some of the larger banks. Are you as confident as the Secretary that the banking system is sound?
Well, if I can, let me describe what I see as the problem. Starting back in 2016 or so, these multi-billion-dollar banks that, like SVB, in fact, Gary Becker, the CEO of SVB, came to Washington and kept saying, lighten the regulations on us. We're just like tiny little banks, so ease up on the regulations. Donald Trump then ran for president, promising he would ease up on the regulations on these multi-billion-dollar banks. He then was elected president, and he put in a lot of regulators who eased up on banking regulations. Trump then went to Congress, and he said, let's ease up even more, and with the help of both parties, passed laws to roll back on regulations and open the door to easing up even more. Then Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, stepped up and took a flamethrower to the regulations, saying, I'm doing this because Congress let me do it. And what happened was exactly what we should have predicted. And that is the banks, these big multi-billion-dollar banks, loaded up on risk. They boosted their short-term profits. They gave themselves huge bonuses and big salaries, and they exploded their banks. And so where we stand now is now the federal government's got to step back in and back up these multi-billion-dollar banks. And I think there's two halves to this. One half is the government is clearly doing that, but there are a lot of people who are saying, gee, if they've been so lightly regulated for such a long period, it's important to look under the hood and see what's happening with the other banks.
Do you think we could see criminal charges?
It depends. I think there will be investigations. Department of Justice has opened an investigation. I think that's appropriate for them to do. We'll see where the facts take them. But we got to take a close look at this. And look, we got to say overall that we can't keep repeating this approach of weakening the regulation over the banks, then stepping in when these giant banks get into trouble. You know, little community banks don't get this benefit. They got to run their shop every single day to make sure they are safe and sound. Their regulators bear down pretty hard on them. It's these giant multi-billion-dollar banks. There was such an irony that Gary Becker came to Washington and said, weaken the regulations because we're just like those tiny little banks that can't pose a risk to the overall economy. And if I can ask you, that's obviously not true.
Yeah, but if I can ask you, though, that deregulatory move in 2018 was supported by a number of your Democratic colleagues who still defend their votes. I mean, Senator Bennett said it was a bipartisan compromise. Jeanne Shaheen, Senator Shaheen has defended it. Angus King has said that reimposing the capital requirements, as your bill would do, to roll back that deregulatory move, could push small and medium-sized banks out of business. How do you respond to your fellow Democrats who are not on board with it?
So remember that in 2018, the bill that was passed had a lot of different provisions, including a lot of provisions that lightened some of the regulations, made life easier for the community banks. And there were people who supported the bill because of that. The part I'm concerned about is called Title IV of the bill. And it's Title IV that says these multi-billion-dollar banks, these banks with $50 billion or more in assets, should have lighter regulation. Those are the banks for whom the principal regulator is the Federal Reserve Bank. And those are the banks that took on these risky practices that ultimately have, it appears, blown up at least 3 banks. And that's the provision I want to see peeled back out of the law. We need tough regulations. You got more than $50 billion, then by golly, you ought to be subjected to stress tests and decent capital requirements.
All right, Senator Warren, thank you for joining us this morning. And we'll be right back after this from our ABC station.
Economics. Chairman Powell looks brilliant off the desk finance.
The breaking news for you, the share sale.
Investment.
You're still seeing the momentum intact.
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Do you want some volatility, Tom? Please. Do you want me to go then?
Tom Keene, Jonathan Ferro, and the names that shape the world's markets. Joseph Stiglitz of Columbia University, the laureate. Bloomberg Surveillance.
We're seeing the sell-off continue to accelerate.
Subscribe today on Apple, Spotify, Bloomberg.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Spring break air travel prices are sky high. For most of March and April, domestic flights are up about 25% over last year, according to Priceline CEO Brett Keller.
Very expensive. If you're trying to travel overseas, which a lot of people are now heading out to Europe, you're going to see prices up to 40% of what you were paying last year.
But that doesn't mean there aren't deals to be had.
If you're looking for a nice, warm beach destination, Fort Lauderdale, always a good option. Myrtle Beach. Puerto Rico is very popular right now. Obviously, Dominican Republic, Jamaica. So the Caribbean continues to be a reasonably affordable place to go.
Overseas, you can take big cities like London and Paris off your list and add something new.
Lisbon, Athens, Munich, even Naples. Those destinations you'll pay maybe a touch less on the flight, but you're really going to save when it comes to your hotel and the average price you're going to pay there.
A little flexibility can go a long way. Lisa Mateo, Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Tape Podcast, a conversation with Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont. From the state of Connecticut, sir, how are you thinking about your state's economy, your state's soundness of the banking system? How are you thinking about those, and how has that evolved over the last week or so?
Look, we watch this carefully. We're a small state. This is obviously, a national issue. This is Connecticut. We're the land of steady habits. There's a little bit of the madness of crowds when you see everybody, running to the bank window to get their money out. And I'd like to think that we follow our banks very closely. We have a good, strong relationship there. We know what their asset base is, and we haven't seen any ripples. I do worry that it's going to make banks a lot more cautious around the country, and that could impact the economy.
Are the banks in Connecticut sound right now? You have full confidence in them?
I really do. Everything I've learned to understand, we have a strong economy. We have a diversified economy. Manufacturing, life sciences, they're all growing strong right now. I think that's reflected in the balance sheet of our banks.
Governor, one of the discussion points here is regulation. Now we're seeing, maybe some of these regional banks should have some more regulation. What's your opinion there?
I think they probably should. The smaller banks are a lot more regional. The more regional have a sort of a customer base.